There is in this week's parsha something very unusual, unique, that only happens once in the entire Tanakh, and that is the mention of the date of death, Yotzeit. Uh, not sure what's going on here, but we'll get that right. Um, and this leads me to want to explore this idea of a Yotzeit. And the person whose Yotzeit is mentioned is Aharon HaKohen. And just a good opportunity to look into Yotzeits, into souls, and to understand, the full legacy and what, who Aaron HaKohen was. So this is the verse at the beginning of the second of the two parashas. We have a combination this week, Matot Maseh. This is the second of the parashas, Maseh, and it recounts the 42 journeys of the Jewish people, starting from Rephidim, when they left Egypt, and eventually getting to the Holy Land and standing where they are at that point, which is in the Moabite plains, just across from Jericho, across the river from Jericho. And it mentions the 42 stops that the Jewish people took, the stages that the Jewish people took through the desert, beginning from Egypt and through Mount Sinai and the desert, Sinai Desert, and many other places. And of course, that brings back a lot of memories. So, as the journey has come to an end now there, across the river from Jericho, Moshe recounts the entire journey of the Jewish people, going step by step. And when they get to Hor Hahar, which is where Aaron died, it mentions his death. And Aaron died there on the first day of the fifth month. So that begs, well, a couple of questions. One which I'm going to be able to answer very quickly, and the other which we're going to develop over the next half an hour or so ahead of us. The first question is, why is it in this week's parsha? Aaron died a few parshas ago in the portion of Chukat, after there was the unfortunate striking of the rock and the unfortunate decree that neither Moshe nor Aaron would cross the river. There, Aaron's death is recorded. It's and the date of that is the first of the fifth month, which is the first of Av. So it's a bit out of place for the death to be recorded here in this week's parsha. It's not when it happened, so it's out of place. But that one I can answer easily by pointing out that the first day of the fifth month is next week, and that portion of Mas'eh is inevitably read either just before Rosh Chodesh Av, the first day of the fifth month. So that's Wednesday next week. Yes, Wednesday next week. So that's why I chose to talk about it now, because Wednesday next week will be too late to follow any of the suggestions I'm going to make shortly. And so it makes sense that it should be in this week's parsha, because that's kind of putting it close to when it's read and when the Yotzat actually occurs. But the second question is, why mention a Yotzat at all? No, nobody's date of death is mentioned. Not Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moshe Rabbeinu. Nobody is mentioned. Aaron is singled out here by mentioning the date of his death, and we need to kind of scratch a little bit to understand why that is so. And the way we're going to get to that is by understanding a little bit of what a Yahrzeit really is. And for us, how do we handle a Yahrzeit? What is it about? What do we do on that day? What's the nature of the day? Is it a day of mourning? Is it a day of reflection? Is it a day of celebration? Um, the souls of the individual's accomplishment. But it's, according to all opinions, it's sorry about that. It's a day of connection to the soul. Um, it's a day when the soul is kind of, I don't want to say judged, maybe that is the correct word, evaluated, and elevated. So it reaches a higher level. The soul, uh, even in heaven, doesn't find absolute rest, but continues to go from place to place. They say, there's no rest for the righteous. Um, as the idiom go, no rest for the wicked, but in this case, no rest for the righteous because they continue to go up from level to level, from stage to stage, and the kind of annual audit and assessment and decision as to where it's going to go. What do they base that? Well, they can't base it on the individual's current actions because there isn't any of that. Once soul has been divested of its vessel, being the body, and it no longer is able to do a mitzvah, to give charity, to learn Torah, to reach greater levels of connectedness with Hashem, or within society, other people. So you can't judge the soul on what it has achieved in the past year, which would be very little. So it's a process that actually goes back to what the person did in this world, and in a sense, what people in this world did for the soul or as a result of the soul. So, yeah, um, the things that we do here, inspired by, guided by, taught by the departed, that counts as credit. It's like compound interest that continues to add up, but not automatically according to a rate that the Reserve Bank sets, uh, but rather by what humans, inspired by, taught by, influenced by, touched by the person who passed away, continue to do in this world, and that counts as credits, and that's part of the that's part of the assessment that is done on that day. Now, is a Yahrzeit a day of seriousness? We think, hey, the soul's being judged, the soul's being evaluated. Or is a day when we actually appreciate the level, the concept of aliyat neshama, the fact that the soul is getting an opportunity of being elevated? And there really are two approaches to this. So you will have the more Litvish approach, which is kind of prevalent in our community, which is primarily a Lithuanian community, where it's almost a day of mourning. It's a day of introspection. It's seen as a very serious day, and there is a strong custom to fast on the Yahrzeit. Definitely not, merriment, no attending of a wedding, for example, on the every Yahrzeit. And that is kind of the one approach. The Hasidic approach is to emphasize the spiritual progression, the Adliya, and therefore a day of celebration, where we kind of say, on this day, um, the soul is found more in the world than any other day of the year, but it's also freed of the shackles of a soul, of a body that held it back, and it's therefore able to go and reach higher levels. And with that, we kind of celebrate the life of the individual. And Say l'chaim is to bring joy down in this world. It's also to share joy with others. It's also to encourage others to do a mitzvah. So the Hasidic Farbrengen, which is kind of a gathering of not just rejoicing. I mean, being together with others is always, in a sense, happy and brings about positive emotions in that way. But it serves as an opportunity, well, first of all, to talk about the departed and their achievements, and therefore to inspire people. um, and at the same time to say l'chaim, to make a bracha, to eat something, to elevate the soul, and kind of it's about balancing both approaches because they're both valid and true. And we got to kind of balance them in our observance of the day. So, all have the custom not to attend a wedding on the day because we respect and honor the departed. At the same time, there's got to be a certain level of happiness. And yeah, so the Lithuanian approach will be to um, emphasize the one over the other. Hasidic approach, again, different slant, really two ways of dealing with the day. So what is done on the yahrzeit, what should be done on the yahrzeit, is connection with the neshama, um, appreciating its journey in a positive way, at the same time in a serious way, and acting here in this world in a way that is going to be able to help this idea of aliyat neshama, of it going to a higher level. So the actions that we do are all centered around this, which means, well, the one we know the most is the Yotzat candle. And the Yotzat candle is probably may I say, the least important of Yahrzeit practices, probably the most well-known, the most famous, and what should I say? It's the easiest to do, but possibly the least important. I mean, it's a way of honoring, it's a way of remembering, it's a way of symbolizing the soul in the home. In Proverbs, it talks about Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. So it talks about this human soul being the candle of Hashem. And so, burning a candle for 24 hours is a way of kind of concretizing that this is a day when the soul is there. But doing mitzvahs, tzedakah, other mitzvot, what does that do? That elevates the soul further. If you're giving tzedakah in the level, in the merit for the benefit of the departed, um, you are actually doing something that tangibly helps with the judgment of that day and with the relocation of the soul to hopefully a better, holier place. I don't know how to explain this concept. What is it? You move from the reception level of a corporate building to the C-suite, and that's what does it mean? It means being closer to Hashem. The whole process of the soul being in heaven is to kind of benefit from the light, the glory, the beauty, the warmth of Hashem. And it's not a spatial thing, but the closer one is there, the more the soul can enjoy and benefit. It's a very powerful light, and therefore one needs to have like protective gear, like a lead apron when there's X-rays, those coats that nuclear scientists don when they go into a facility so that they don't get affected by the rays. So that's it, for a soul to be kind of exposed to Hashem's divine light. That is extremely potentially dangerous to the soul that could kind of extinguish itself. The more protective gear it wears, the more it can benefit, the more it can enjoy, the closer it could be to Hashem. So it's like putting on lots of protective aprons. Every mitzvah a person does in their life becomes a garment of the soul. And once the soul is fully dressed and goes to heaven, that's the protective gear it has. And then, yeah, when we do mitzvahs, when we give tzedakah, then we kind of giving them extra layers, which allows them extra closeness to Hashem. The interesting one is the fourth one on the page, and that's the siyum. what does a siyum do? Well, it has a number of achievements. First of all, a siyum is the conclusion of a tractate of the Talmud. That's an achievement. And the fact that one has now learned Torah over a period of time, usually for a year. People do see on the yard site, annually have studied the tractate of the Talmud and not concluded on that day. So that's a tremendous achievement, and that's done in the memory of the person and the memory, Ilun Neshama, for the elevation of the soul. And that's very, very powerful. And it has another great achievement. This, as I mentioned, the practice of, kind of celebrating on the day of a yahrzeit. That's not so simple, since it's also a time when the soul is being judged. A siyum is, of course, for celebration. So if you make a siyum, and we get together and celebrate over the mitzvah, the conclusion of a tractate, that gives cause for joy, and that's being done for the soul. So it kind of bridges the dichotomy, the great split between the two natures of the day, by doing something for the benefit of the neshama that is also something which causes great joy to the celebrants. And so if you have a gathering of friends, of family members, and you conclude a tractate of the Talmud, and you rejoice over that, and you say l'chaim over that, then that becomes a perfectly acceptable way of dealing with a day which otherwise does have that somberness to it. Now that we understand a yahrzeit, and we're a week away from Aaron HaKohen's yahrzeit, we get a bit of a better insight into why the Torah wants us to know about this particular yahrzeit. It wants us to know about this particular yahrzeit because we get to action it. And when it means actioning it is, we know very well what Aaron stood for. Our texts tell us about Aaron, and what defined him as a person, and what he did with his life. It's Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, 12th Mishnah, and where we told that Heve mitamidav shel Aaron, ohev shalom, rodef shalom, ohev et habriot, kavan Torah, be a disciple of Aaron who loves peace, pursues peace. And I think in this year we've spoken about Aaron on many occasions, and how he kind of bent the truth in order to achieve peace. But really, his life was one of creating unity and peace in the community, and by loving personally his fellow creatures, and that's the word is briot, because he loved his fellow creatures. He was able to draw them close to Torah simply by loving them and showing them the greatness of the relationship that he had with them. They wanted to respect what he stood for. So that's Aaron, and that's our agenda for next Wednesday, which is the day of the Yahrzeit of Aaron. We want to continue 3,300, it's quite 3,009, 3,200, whatever it is, 90 years later, to show that we are disciples of Aaron. And what that does is make us true Talmidim of Aaron, who are doing things to help his soul. And the reason why we want to know that date is because this is such a pivotal, foundational principle in Torah, the pursuit of peace, and having shalom, around. Whenever you look at, Aramida, Birkat Kohanim, whatever it may be. So shalom is always the ultimate achievement. And that's really because Torah is all about bringing peace into the world, as quoted many places in our writings. So yes, there is one Yahrzeit mentioned in the Torah, and we know the date, and that compels us to action. What has to happen on a Yahrzeit? Even though we're not all Kohanim, some of us are, most of us are not. we still have to be disciples of Aaron in that way, bring peace into the world and elevate Aaron's neshama higher, and higher. But this also explains the timing of this, and it's an amazing thought that Aaron died on the first of Av, which is the beginning of the 9 days, and this is such a powerful concept and idea. What is about the 9 days? The 9 days is, of course, when we mourn for the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple. Um, but it's not just about mourning. It's about positively rebuilding the temple. We rebuild the temple brick by brick by the mitzvahs we do. So why was the temple destroyed? Um, well, no, it was baseless hatred. It was a total societal breakdown. It's characterized and described in the Talmud Gittin, by the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, in a famous event where, you know, there was a fellow who made a big feast, and then the invitation was misdirected to Bar Kamsa, his arch enemy, rather than Kamsa, who was his best friend. And this caused an absolute chaos and scene, and Bar Kamsa was ejected, unceremoniously from the party, and this, was it was actually an act of total baseless hatred because this fellow, to save himself embarrassment, offered first to pay for the cost of his food, then to pay for 50% of the cost of the entire feast, eventually going as far as offering to pay for the entire feast. And the host remains nameless in the story. The host says, "No way, I don't want you at my feast," and leave, and has him ejected from his party, causing him great embarrassment. Now, listen, who turns down the offer of a sponsorship of whatever it was, your daughter's wedding? It's a very expensive event, banqueting, inviting people over. That's very expensive, and he's turning all that down because his hatred is more powerful than even his love of money, and we all know that's big. So that shows it's kind of a story that is a paradigm of the level of societal breakdown that was prevalent in the pre-destruction era. In fact, the Talmud then links it with this fellow being so upset, particularly that it happened in front of all the rabbis of Jerusalem had been invited. He then sets up an elaborate ploy to upset the emperor in Rome, and one thing leads to another. And that leads to the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So during the 3 weeks, we were smack in the middle of them now, or at least one week into them. Yep, one week into them. And we're doing those 3 weeks from the 17th of Tammuz, leading up to Tisha B'Av. We don't just mourn the destruction, but we actually try and get involved in the antidote of that destruction, which is the opposite of baseless hatred. That's ahavat chinam, or baseless love. Really going out there. Now, if you think of Aaron's life, it was really about creating love between people that had nothing to do with him. You've heard there was a faribble. So what's our general approach to a faribble? You approach the party with whom you think you have the best relationship, and you said, "Hey, how was Yankel?" And friends says, "Well, actually, I haven't spoken to him several weeks, several months." Oh, what's the matter? And in pursuit of your own curiosity, but also you fan the flames of the machlekas. You make it worse. Aaron's the polar opposite of that. He's trying to bring people together, even total strangers. He hears this variable. He says, "I'm going to make sure that this doesn't exist anymore. I'm not interested in the causes of it. I'm just interested in there being peace again." So that's the life of Aharon. And now things always take, during these 3 weeks, a more kind of twist of more severe, more serious, more somber when we get to the first of Av, and many of the practices of mourning then kick in. That's when we stop eating meat. drinking wine, and really seriously, mourn for the destruction of the temple, not enough just to mourn. So Aaron loses his life on that day, and his Yotzar is then on that day, leading into those 9 days of mourning, 9 days of rebuilding, 9 days of building the temple brick by brick, by having acts of peace and of baseless love, and that rebuilds the temple. So it's timed very appropriately on the beginning of that period, which is the Yotzei of Aaron, which is the day that we know about, and now we know what we have to know. We know when we have to do it, and we know why we have to do it. So I've given you a week, and you can start ahead. I've given you a week to ponder on how you're going to, which bricks you're going to build in the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. Good luck. Have a good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.